Well, hey guys, I'm Nick and welcome back to Sci-Finatics. Well, today we're talking about episode 5 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, season 2, entitled Charades. This was a funny episode. I had many laugh out loud moments during this episode, which I kind of thought I would. This episode definitely played for humour. We saw Spock lose his Vulcanness, becoming 100% human, and dealing with all these strange human emotions in this quite comical way, which I thought was a really good episode. Today we're going to look through all the highlights, moments, plot points, all of the usual breakdown details in my review of this week's episode called Charades. So the episode begins with Chapel voiceovering a personal log, talking about the analysis of a Vulcan moon known as Kirchhoff. As I mentioned in my breakdown of the sneak peek scene or whatever, Kirchhoff sounds suspiciously like someone's joined Kirk and Chekhov together and to make a new Star Trek name. So I'm guessing no doubt that this moon of Vulcan is sort of named after the captain and the helmsman of the Enterprise in the original series. So it starts off with Chapel kind of going through these revisions and exercises that she's doing. She's trying to get into the Vulcan Science Academy, do a course there, and there's obviously a lot of hoops she has to jump through in order to check all of the boxes to make sure that she, gets in. And it seems pretty clear in this episode that there's an undercurrent of kind of weirdness between Spock and Chapel that's, let's face it, has been going on since season 1. There's always been these little moments between the two of them where it's sort of a, will they, won't they kind of situation. And it seems like the two of them are quite uncomfortable by each other's presence because they both kind of acknowledge there's sort of something going on here, but we kind of can't really talk about it. I love all the establishing jokes in this episode to kind of, I guess let's face it, to put a baseline at sort of Spock's emotional reaction trigger point. Like we had situations where Spock is cleaning up after Sam Kirk. Sam Kirk's leaving his rubbish on the table, and you can see that it's sort of bothering Spock, but he's just not letting it trigger him, and he just sort of politely goes over there and removes the stuff from the table. We've got the crew getting together for some drinks in the mess hall and laughing at jokes and situations which everybody else is finding very amusing, but Spock just doesn't have any kind of reaction to because he's not quite grasping the whole concept of humour. So there are all these little cool moments. Spock in Pike's quarters, Pike's trying to teach him a bit of cooking skills, getting him to smell the basil and everything from the cooking, and not having any kind of reaction or anything to any of the lovely fresh ingredients and stuff that Pike is using to obviously cook a nice steak or some ribs or something he's got going on there. So there's all these little cool moments where we're kind of establishing, right, this is Spock's baseline for non-emotional reaction, because you can kind of tell that later on in the episode we're going to revisit these moments and see what it's like once he does have an emotional response to these exact moments. And we soon find out that there's this dinner that's planned between T'Pring and her parents and Spock and his mum, and you can just tell that this is gonna play out, down the line in a very awkward manner. Next, we see the shuttle trip between Spock and Chapel, where they're going to investigate this ancient civilization that used to, or I guess does exist within the moon of Vulcan moon of Kirchhoff, but it's sort of not on the same, I guess, ethereal plane as the usual. It's in a sort of an alternate dimension. And there's a rift that crosses the boundaries between the dimension of the Alpha Quadrant and this sort of extra-dimensional dimension where these entities live. Spock and Chapel's shuttle gets swept through into the other side. There's a bit of a time jump where we go back to sickbay, and Chapel seems fine. She seems to have come through the ordeal quite unscathed, but Spock has lost all of his Vulcan DNA. It's been completely scrubbed of him, and only his human DNA exists now. And our pre-title teaser ends with a very human response from Spock saying, what the f***? So that was a kind of a really nice start to the episode. Next, we find a bit of investigative work being done by Una and Lan, and they find essentially what appears to be some sort of communication calling card by the aliens that, fixed the shuttle, fixed up Chapel and Spock and everything and sent them back repaired, or what they thought was repaired, but wasn't. Spock was injured, and they kind of analysed Chapel, and they saw she was human and Spock was injured, and they just assumed that he was meant to be like her. So they basically just scrubbed all of his Vulcan DNA off and replaced it with human DNA, and that was their solution to the problem. And they used this calling card to initiate contact with the Kirkovians. And the Kirkovians are an interesting alien race. Let's just say the Kirkovians are like a human call center operator. It's very difficult to get an actual response out of them, and their responses are very straightforward. It's sort of almost like press this button to get this operator, or this has been done. You don't need to speak to us anymore. Don't call again. It was very matter of fact, very much like dealing with some sort of pre-recorded phone operator or something on some sort of phone service that we often have to deal with here on Earth, where we just want to speak to a human. We just want to get proper answers out of people, and we just can't speak to a person, or they can't give us the right answer that we need, and it's very frustrating getting an actual definitive answer to your questions. And the Kirkovians are very much like this kind of call center mentality, I guess you'd say. Next we see our first sort of parallel scene with Spock in his human form. He was previously unaffected by any of Pike's cooking, but now he seems to be quite enamored with the smell and taste of bacon, as we all tend to be. Those of us who are, like to indulge in a piece of bacon from time to time, there's sort of nothing quite like the smell of cooking bacon. He's really loving that bacon. He's hoeing into the bacon like there's no tomorrow. Not only that, he's having drinks with the crew in the mess hall. They're telling jokes, and Spock's actually laughing at the jokes. He's in fact finding the jokes incredibly hilarious, in absolute hysterics over these jokes. So it's kind of fun to see these moments in the episode where we've obviously seen the baseline prior to the accident, and now we're getting the same situation. It's played out without his Vulcan emotional suppressant in play. He's even getting very riled up at Sam Kirk leaving a mess on the conference table. He's got his coffee cup and some crumbs and everything from his lunch or whatever, which is really getting under Spock's skin, and he is really struggling to kind of cope with these sort of situations that are just emotionally driving him, up the wall. It seems that these heightened emotions that Spock's feeling in his current state are much similar to adolescent feelings, So Spock is very much sort of, like a teenager who just can't regulate his emotions particularly well. He's making outbursts in every situation that he kind of comes across. I was laughing out loud throughout this episode. There was so many really funny situations, that fish out of water kind of humour. It was done really, really well. And I think Ethan Peck did a fantastic job this episode of really bringing to life the human side of Spock, bringing all those little moments where what would we like to see Spock really kind of, do if he was unfettered by his emotional blocks, and I think they played that really nicely. And even when Latta talks to him about managing his impulse controls and everything, and he's got all these kind of adolescent emotions swirling away and everything, he's kind of, I guess you'd say, eyeballing Latta a little bit, ogling her a little bit in some ways, and it's sort of like, let's just pull it back a notch, Spock. Workplace, HR, there'll be a complaint, and next thing you know, you'll be up for some sort of hearing for sexual harassment in the workplace. So just cool it, buddy. Meanwhile, Chapel's hunting for a cure, but not really having any headway. Her and Mbenga are struggling. Whatever the technology that's been used by these aliens to transform Spock is beyond their level of medical expertise. It seems to be completely impossible for them to synthesize a cure of any kind. Chapel has her interview with a representative from the Vulcan Science Academy, and I've got to say, he's a bit of a rude prick. He's very full of himself and the Academy, and that implies that Chapel doesn't bring anything even remotely to the table, despite her extensive experience and everything that she's gone through and studied and encountered and everything. The Vulcans just don't care. They're just not impressed with her at all. They're kind of being not particularly pleasant and a bit sort of gruff and a bit rude. Chapel sort of starts to maybe, think about, do I really want to, go and away and study with these guys for a while, it could be a difficult situation. Chapel bumps into Spock in the corridor, and Spock says, "Yeah, hey, Vulcans can be jerks." He's very self-aware that this is in fact the case. And gives Chapel a bit of a hug. To help her feel better. But obviously, this hug is a little bit more than just a hug from two friends, something a little bit more behind the hug. We all know there is. Spock's mum comes on board. She's there for the whole parental ceremony thing. And she kind of clues up that there's something weird going on. Pike and Spock are doing a really terrible job at covering up this fact that something has gone down, and they're just trying to cover up whatever has happened. But, let's face it, mums know best sometimes, and she knows her son, and she knows that something is up. And Spock's wearing a very bad beanie to try to hide the fact that he hasn't got pointed ears anymore. And it's sort of like, yeah, there's some really good moments in this scene with, Pike saying he's got a beanie of the same kind, and Spock's trying to hide the ears and suppress his emotional responses and everything. I love the moment when Spock pulls off the beanie to reveal the rounded human ears, and he just kind of goes, "Hi, Mom." That was a funny moment. There's so many cool funny moments in this episode. It seems like they're really going to struggle to get the approval of T'Pring's mum. To Prill, she seems, a very hard taskmaster. Nothing impresses her. She doesn't like Spock one little bit because of his human heritage, and she's kind of, doing all she can to kind of put the kibosh on the whole marriage situation. Next is probably one of my favourite scenes in this episode, where we have all the girls from the Enterprise trying to teach Spock what it is to be Vulcan. Uhura and Number One and Ortegas and Laan, and they're all trying to give Spock advice as to how he needs to behave to be a Vulcan, and they're all speaking like a Vulcan and showing him how to, do facial expressions like a Vulcan. This was a hilarious scene. I was laughing out loud through all of this scene as each other of the bridge crew tried to give Spock some advice. Little Vulcan idiosyncrasies and everything as to how he needs to act and behave to pull off his Vulcanness for this anniversary dinner. Then we have Spock trying to do the whole fake a mind meld routine, because that's part of the ceremony that he has to reenact, and he's even struggling with that, even just to be sort of still and centered and to try to fake a mind meld. He's just fuming at everything that kind of is irritating him, and nothing works, and he just doesn't buy it, and it's just he's struggling to even convince Pike and Una that he can pull this off. It seems pretty clear that Mbenga and Chapel have pretty much struck out in terms of finding a cure. That's not working. So Chapel is going to mount I guess a sort of a first contact-ish kind of mission to the extra-dimensional plane where she's roped in Ortegas and Uhura to try to go and chat to call center aliens, the Corcovians. Blue and Yellow are their names. I'm blue, get them to I don't know, fix Spock, or give them the antidote to fix Spock's genetics. We meet T'Pring's mother, and she isn't the easiest mother to get along with. Let's just say she's the typical, mother-in-law, but, on a Vulcan level, which just puts it on a whole new scale altogether. The husband seems to be a little bit more accommodating until his wife kind of chimes in on certain things, and then has to immediately agree with her. So obviously he's a little bit under the thumb, it would seem. It's very hard to please to Prill. She seems like, yes, not the easiest to get along with. She even tells Pike his quarters smell. Not the most diplomatic of people, it would seem. Ortegas, Chapel and Uhura head into the rift to try to talk to these aliens to get an antidote for Spock's condition. They enter the vortex whilst Spock is trying to have the tea ceremony with the in-laws. He's got to pick up a boiling hot pot of tea which has no handle on it whatsoever, and he's burning the skin off his hands, and surely it wouldn't be that hard to put a handle on a teapot. Meanwhile, while Spock is internally screaming at the skin being flayed off his fingers from boiling hot teapots, the girls are off in the shuttle interdimensional space, talking with the Kirkovians, trying to get that cure out of them. It's very frustrating talking to a Kirkovian. Yes, I wonder whether the brief for creating these was just, come up with the most frustrating call center where you're on hold for ages and you're just trying to get a simple answer to a simple question, but you keep getting transferred between departments and nobody seems to be able to give you a straight answer, and then you put on hold for ages, and we can all empathize with that, and we know how frustrating it can be. After we've had the tea ceremony, we move on to the honesty ceremony, which is basically the complain about everything that you hate about somebody ceremony, where T'Pring just basically rips on Spock non-stop, complaining about everything she hates about him, and he is just really struggling to hold in his anger and frustrations, and he's kind of fuming at all of her criticisms. His mother-in-law is pretty harsh, and he's struggling to fight back the emotion, and has to go out of the room for a fake pee break, and he's like punching and kicking the air and screaming into a pillow, and yeah, he's really struggling to keep it in. It seems like Chapel is struggling a little bit to get a straight answer out of the Kirkovians. They keep going round and round in circles. They seem to reveal that it was Spock that kind of saved Chapel by extending the shields more so on her side of the shuttle, so that she was protected in the accident, and Spock was obviously injured. But yeah, she finds out that just, that nice gesture that he did to try to save her life at the expense of his own safety. In order to get the antidote, I guess you'd call it, from the Kirkovians, Chapel has to kind of admit her feelings towards Spock, encouraged by Uhura and Ortegas, who's just like, come on, just say it. We know what's going on. Like, you just don't want to admit it. Just say it. We get to the mind meld part of the tradition where Spock has to fake a mind meld, but we know that this is not going to work. He's not going to fool anybody, and it's all going to come out. And Pike tries to jump in to save the situation by trying to crowbar in a game of charades, as if it's some historical Earth tradition that has to be done in these situations to try to take the focus off Spock, which is obviously where the episode title comes in. It appears like Chapel has been successful in her negotiations with the Kirkovians. She's obviously managed to go through multiple people at the call centre and finally get a clear answer out of somebody. Despite Chapel giving Spock the cure, he manages to fess up anyway to protect his mother. His mother's obviously struggled for quite a bit raising him on Vulcan and having problems with herself, being a bit shunned by Vulcan society, and obviously Spock being a bit shunned by Vulcan society. And, he feels bad that what she's been through, and he basically fesses up to say, look, I am human, and all this time I've been human, and I've still managed to fool you, so that just proves that, you're just racist and a bigot and prejudiced against humans, and you need to, pull up your socks. And this situation seems to have weighed on T'Pring's mind quite a bit, because Spock basically told everybody what was going on, apart from T'Pring. He left her out of the loop, and it sort of strained the relationship a bit, and they've been on again, off again, and a bit distant, and it's really difficult for them to catch any time with each other, with Spock on the Enterprise. So it's sort of, the relationship was sort of, I guess, designed to be a bit doomed from the get-go, and T'Pring initiates a break in the relationship. Chapel doesn't get into the Vulcan Science Academy, but let's face it, who would really want to? They're a bunch of jerks, and rude, and just full of themselves, and all of the skills and experiences that Chapel brings to the table, they don't care about. They're just obviously very prejudiced towards humans of any kind, and Chapel kind of rubs it in their nose a bit, saying, I don't want to get into your stupid academy. Good on her for standing up for herself. I think, she's obviously got a pretty good resume to get in, and they're just turning her down, not on the basis of her intelligence and experience level and experiences, but just, I guess, because it seems like Vulcans just have a prejudice towards anybody else apart from Vulcans being inferior. We have a nice farewell scene between Spock and his mother as she departs, just going over some experiences that he had as a boy and lack of acceptance with Vulcan society and other, students and everything. And him and his mother have a nice bonding moment there. And we obviously end the episode with Spock and Chapel. Now that Spock and T'Pring are on a bit of a break.
We were on a break! my God!
It's kind of freed up the relationship status to explore things with Chapel. So the episode ends with a kiss between Spock and Chapel and them, starting something. So it'll be interesting to see where this leads in future episodes. It's obviously been bubbling away for a while, and now that they've admitted their feelings towards each other, it's going to be really interesting to see where this progresses to in future episodes. Guys, I really love this episode. It was so funny, so great to see these little fish out of water sort of style moments with Spock losing his Vulcanness and forced to embrace his humanity. Really, really good moments. I was laughing all the way through this episode, and I thought it was really funny stuff. It's always great to see such a diverse types of episodes in Strange New Worlds. We get episodes that go from adventure to action to romance to comedy. It's such a palette that they draw from, and I think they're doing a really good job with the show. Loving the show, loving the cast. The characters are really growing on me, and now that we're halfway through the season, I can't wait to see what the second half of the season is going to bring us in Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Guys, be sure to come and check out my live stream on the weekend. Saturday morning, if you're getting up, having some breakfast, making yourself a coffee, tune in to the live show on YouTube. I'll be there with Brian from the podcast, David and Steve Charades as well. We'll be talking about Star Trek stuff, going over the last few Star Trek Strange New Worlds episode and talking about other Star Trek news that's happening in the world. So be sure to tune in and check out the live stream on Saturday morning. But guys, let me know what you think. Leave a thought in the comments section. Let me know what you thought of episode 5 of season 2, Charades. Did you laugh out loud like I did? I thought this was hilarious, this episode. But let me know your thoughts. Please leave a comment. And guys, if you haven't checked out my merch store yet, please go over and check that out as well. Links in the description. Hoodies, mugs, caps, t-shirts, stickers, you name it. Water bottles, they're all there. Plenty of cool Star Trek designs. Pick yourself up a bargain. And it also helps support the channel as well. So that's much appreciated. I'll be back really soon with my next video. I'll see you guys soon.